Lisa Coffey, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm from a small village called Prosperous in County Kildare in Ireland, and I moved to Australia in 2009 to see what the Australian racing industry was like in comparison to Ireland.
Did you have much of a background with horses before you came across?
So I started riding when I was about 12, and I'm not from a horsey family or a racing family, so my love of horses came from a holiday in Spain when we just went on a trial ride. And when I came back from Spain, I just hounded my parents to send me for riding lessons. So I was quite lucky that we had Ronan Corrigan and his mother that lived a few miles away from us, and they allowed me ride Ronan's ponies, and they taught me for a few years, encouraged me to do pony club, and the passion just grew from there. So I did pony club and show jumping and eventing. Eventually a friend of mine, Gary Cribben, who's a jockey agent, told me that a national hunt trainer called Niall Madden was looking for a track rider. So I went down to Niall's and gave it a go, and that's where my love for racing came from, and I've never looked back since.
It's a long way between Ireland and Australia. What was the real reason you wanted to come out and investigate?
So the racing industries are very different, and when I was in Ireland I was lucky enough to work for a transport company called Horse France Ireland, and I got to travel a lot with Aidan O'Brien's runners to different countries, which was great. So that gave me a taste for travel. And then at the same time, maybe around 2008, the recession started to set into Ireland, and we had an equestrian centre that we ran as a business at home. So we were kind of feeling the pinch a little bit. We ended up leasing out the equestrian centre, and then I kind of took my chance to travel over here.
Did you know much about Australian racing before you come? Maybe the Melbourne Cup, that might have been the only thing you knew?
Yeah, so in my mind's eye, what I saw in Australia was this fabulous horse race called the Melbourne Cup that was worth a lot of money, but then everything else I knew about Australia was Skippy the bush kangaroo and put a shrimp on the barbie and all the typical euphemisms that come with being Australian and well, being a tourist in Australia, I suppose, too. So I was looking for a different experience of racing and some sun.
What were your first roles in racing in Australia when you arrived?
So when I arrived in Australia, I was offered a job with a Melbourne Cup winning trainer out in Seymour, which is probably about 2 hours away from the city. And I didn't realise there was such a big difference between country and city racing, so I really wanted to come and work for a city trainer and experience the differences again. So I rode for 2 very good trainers at Caulfield, and I was lucky enough for 4.5 years to ride for Peter Moody, who trained Black Caviar. While I was at Caulfield, a friend of mine who also rode told me there was a job available at Racing Victoria as the education officer, which was a similar role to what I did in Ireland through the racing school there. So I applied for the job and I was lucky enough to get it.
So tell us a little bit about what you do day to day in that role.
So my main responsibility, I'm now called the Workforce Development Officer. So what I do is I design and develop courses for people to train and upskill to work in the racing industry. So that can range from stable hands to track riders, trainers, jumps jockeys, jumps trainers. And what we've focused on mainly in the last couple of years has been trying to fill the critical shortage of track riders that exists in Victoria at the moment.
It sounds like a difficult job, but what do you get most fun out of day to day?
It can be very challenging. So there's lots of different personalities, and different people obviously have different views on how important education is. But what I love most about it is getting to work with lots of different people and lots of different horses. And through our programs we use a lot of retired racehorses, so it's really great to be able to take racehorses when they're finished their racing career, retrain them and then use them to educate people who want to work.
The Off the Track program in Victoria is one of the great initiatives. Do you think that it's something that could work in Ireland as well?
The Off the Track program in Victoria is fantastic. It's given people who retrain retired racehorses a real profile, and it's advertised what people have been doing for quite a long time with racehorses. So it's probably a program that could be utilised in Ireland. But I know from my own experience with having ridden horses for trainers and at the same time running an equestrian centre, it's something it's just done all the time anyway. And because there's a lot more jumps racing in Ireland, the horses tend to be a little bit more educated and probably a little more settled when they go into their equestrian careers. So they tend to do quite a lot of hunting sometimes, and some racehorses will have already gone to pony club. So they already have that little bit more education. So it's something that's done quite a lot in Ireland.
Australia's in a unique place to live. What do you enjoy most about being out here?
I love the weather out here. 2 very distinct seasons. So I get to ski a lot in the winter and then get to go to the beach a lot in the summer. I also love where I live. I live on the Mornington Peninsula. So I'm probably about 10 minutes walk to the beach and then about 15 minutes drive to about 30 wineries, which is really great, good options.
You've made the big shift to come to Australia. If you're going to offer advice to someone else who's going to work in the equine industry abroad, what would that be?
If anyone ever has the opportunity to travel internationally, I would highly recommend it. I couldn't recommend travelling enough. It gives you a real sense of what else is out there in the world, the difference in the racing industries in different countries, and it gives you a real respect for other people's cultures. Because one of the things that I really learned when I was travelling with Aidan O'Brien's horses was that the racing industries, racing is racing, and horse racing is it's the same sport. But how people work in it, how people develop it, people's attitudes towards it, they're different everywhere. And it gives you a real understanding of how it works in different areas in the world.
You mentioned working for Peter Moody, trainer of Black Caviar. Was she your favourite Australian horse?
I was very, very lucky to work for Peter Moody for over 4 years, and I was even luckier to be in his stable when Black Caviar had her campaign. So it was nice to see her go from being a not so well-known horse to being one of the most famous racehorses in the world. And she was a very unique character and a beautiful horse. But I have to say that my favourite horse would be Bash Boy. So Bash Boy is a steeplechaser here in Australia, and he was the first horse to win 3 Grand Nationals steeplechases. He was also the first racehorse to win the Crisp and the Grand National in consecutive years, and I think he carried the highest weight in the last Grand National since 1957, which was a pretty significant achievement for him.
And did he provide your greatest racing memory, or was there something else that sticks in your mind?
My greatest racing memory definitely is when I was standing in Federation Square in the middle of the city in Melbourne, watching Black Caviar run in Ascot on the big screen. So having been in the stable and gone through the preparation with the team at Moody Racing, knowing how much work and effort and blood, sweat and tears, passion, love went into getting that horse to Ascot, watching her and thinking that she may have just been beaten crossing the finish line, it was absolutely nail-biting stuff. But then realising that she'd won was fantastic.
Racing in Australia is a 7-day-a-week business. Doesn't allow you a lot of spare time. What does Lisa Coffey do when she has a break?
So in my spare time, at the moment I'm finishing my psychology qualification so I can register as a psychologist. And when I'm not studying, I love to ski. So I try and follow the snow. I'm a bit of a ski bum, try and follow the snow around the world. So I've done France and Italy, we went to Japan in January this year, and then we've booked Snowmass in Aspen for January next year and Austria for April. And then I'll probably come back and ski most weekends at Mount Buller.
I'm sure you've still got a strong connection to Ireland. If you could bring 3 things back, what would they be?
If I could bring 3 things back from Ireland, definitely first up will be my family. So when I came to Australia, I came by myself. I didn't come with a group of backpackers, which in itself was probably a good thing because it made me go out and find new friends and a new pseudo family. But yeah, I definitely miss my family. I would also bring National Hunt Racing out here. National Hunt Racing is huge at home. It's probably bigger than flat racing, and it's the complete opposite here, with jumps racing being a lot smaller than flat racing. So I'd love to bring a National Hunt team out and its supporters. And then lastly, I would introduce pony racing to here, so it's high on my agenda at the moment.
You mentioned Irish racing, and it's something you'd love to see out here, especially the jumps racing. Do you get the chance to watch much Irish racing? I
don't get to watch a lot of Irish racing on the TV. I watch Cheltenham and Ascot and the big meetings when they're broadcast, but I just thank God for the Irish field online because that's what keeps me up to date with everything.
You're well in-depth in racing in Australia. If there was one change you could make, what would that be?
If I could make one change in racing in Australia, I would try and replicate the stable staff associations that exist in Ireland and Great Britain. So in Australia we have a trainers association and there's a jockeys association, but there is no stable staff association. And I think because it's a 7-day industry, it's quite a high pressure job to have, even though there's not as much responsibility attached to it as jockeys and trainers. But I think it's definitely something that's needed.
You must be lucky to work in a job that you love. Do you feel lucky?
I feel extremely lucky. Looking back on the first day that I rode that trial horse in Spain, I actually have a photograph of that day, the very first time I sat on a horse on my desk at Racing Victoria, because it just reminds me of how far I've come. I think if you work hard and you're very passionate about something, it will definitely pay off in the end.
And what goals do you have for the future?
Goals for the future would be to establish a racing academy in Victoria. I'd love to establish a tri-code racing academy because harness racing and greyhound racing are quite similarly aligned with thoroughbred racing. And people that work in those three industries are also quite similar. So they work for the love of the animal and the love of the sport. So I think the Tri-Code Racing School will be fantastic.